welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Barjo.
Tonight in the show, we crawl our way back into the red and blue tights of Marvel's marvellous web-slinger, the amazing Spider-Man.
And from silky webs to sandy sandstorms in Spec Ops: The Line, which surprisingly is one of the most thought-provoking shooters we've ever played.
Plus, now we've kicked off a new financial year. Have you ever thought about how a game developer's tax bill can influence the kinds of games you get to play? Well, Goose will be taking a look at how the government is encouraging local devs to innovate.
But first, can you guess the game for this week?
You gonna swing off to the news, Barjo?
Sure, Hex.
Nifty trick, that.
Good game.
Sony Computer Entertainment has acquired the online cloud gaming service Gaikai for over $370 million. The service allows for full games to be streamed over the internet with off-site hardware running the games. This has the potential to allow next-gen quality games to be played on any device with a fast enough internet connection. A recent report has revealed that Vivendi intends to sell its 61% majority share in publisher Activision Blizzard. According to the source, if Vivendi cannot find a buyer, it will sell its shares on the stock market. Activision Blizzard has been profitable, however their estimated value has fallen from over $18 billion in 2007 down to just over $8 billion. Sega has announced it will be closing a number of its studios around the world, including Australia. Sega's Chief Operating Officer Jurgen Post commented that the closures were made as the publisher intends to focus on digital products and core IPs, including Sonic, Total War, Football Manager, and Aliens. Prototype developer Radical Entertainment has laid off almost half of its workforce and will no longer develop its own games. The studio will now provide support development for other Activision titles. Radical had been in operation for 20 years and developed over 40 games, including Mario is Missing, Simpsons Hit and Run, Hulk, Scarface, and Hulk Ultimate Destruction. Rumours of a brand new game console that will run on an Android system have begun to spread. The console will be called Ouya and will allow any developer to publish games on the platform, but only if they're free to play. The console will apparently go on sale for less than $100 and will come with development kits built into the machine.
Good game.
With The Amazing Spider-Man getting a reboot in the cinemas, he obviously has to have a game to tie in with it. But is it amazing or not so spectacular?
This isn't a retelling of the film's story, but follows on directly from the events of the film, so I guess there are some movie spoilers here. Although, I don't know how much of a spoiler it is to say that Spider-Man saves the day and gets the bad guy. I mean, that happens, sorry.
Yeah, but the basic gist of it is scientist Kurt Connors, aka the Lizard, has been defeated. His cross-species experiments at the Oscorp company are being scrapped by its new boss, Alistair Smythe, who is voiced by obscure voice actor Nolan North.
No game is complete without Nolan.
Follow me. I trust you'll keep everything you see in the strictest confidence.
But then Spider-Man manages to accidentally cause what's left of Connor's cross-species experiments to break out of Oscorp, and Smythe then releases his army of robots to save the day. But of course, armies of robots have a habit of going wrong.
Movie tie-in games often suffer from short development cycles and also script inconsistencies between the movie and the game. But in this case, it's actually much better than your average movie game, and because it's set after the film itself, it freed up the developer to do a bunch of different things with the story. It's It's been 8 years since the excellent Spider-Man 2, and since then we've mostly been confined to swinging about in tiny corridors with Spider-Man games. But finally, we get to return to an open-world Manhattan. And Hex, I think this is the best swinging Spider-Man has ever had. Once I got out of that first mission and I was into the open world, I just swung about for an hour without even doing anything else.
Yeah, it's almost worth playing just for that experience, isn't it? It's such a wonderful sense of freedom. The way his body flings and spins in the sunlight and he launches over and around buildings, it's not quite as complex as other open world superhero games like Prototype or Infamous, but I don't know, it's just that simple joy. Fans of the old game might be a little bit sad at the simplified web slinging here. You can just hold right trigger and swing around with your web connected to invisible ceilings in the sky. I know it works to create that fluidity, but I think it's really gonna bug some people, Bajo.
Yeah, I think so too, but it's a trade-off, isn't it? I don't think Spidey has ever looked this cinematic. Plus, one of the biggest achievements of this game is you can be swinging through this open world in between lots of different buildings with really short, narrow passageways, and you never hit the walls. The game just knows where you want to go. Amazing. Plus, I liked how every now and then if you swing past a civilian, they yell out something. Or take a photo.
I'm just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Vacation.
There's also lots of comic books to collect, and this reminded me a lot of Crackdown's orbs because you can just get lost for hours. Ooh, there's a comic book.
Wow, look at this.
There's another one.
Interesting.
Hey, get back here, flying comic book.
All right.
And best of all, they unlock actual comic books.
Yeah, they're a great distraction. I think this game is at its best, though, when you're in those big boss battles in the open world. They're so spectacular.
Just like David and Goliath. Hey, come back! I'm pretty sure he's talking to you.
I also really liked the new web rush feature, which lets you stop time for a few seconds, look around, and then sling off in another direction. Or you can even just tap the bumper to fly off without stopping time. It's a great way to move around and find parts of the environment that you can use to your advantage. You can also just tap the other bumper to retreat instantly from a fight and give yourself some breathing room. They've thought really hard about how to make it easy to move as Spidey, and it just works.
Let's talk about the combat. I think it's fair to say they've taken a fairly hefty chunk of inspiration from the Batman games, right down to the little glowy lights above Spidey's head, letting him know that he needs to perform a counter. And of course, Spidey doesn't have any gadgets, so it's all web-based attacks, which you can upgrade. Do you think it worked, Hex?
Well, I enjoyed it. I mean, it's a different move for the series, but once you start upgrading your abilities, things start looking pretty spectacular.
Want a taste of your own medicine? Come on!
I wasn't a huge fan of it. I just think it works really well for Batman because he's all about waiting for that attack and then countering it, and that kind of cool, calm, collected gameplay really suits that counter-focused attack style. But when I think of Spider-Man, I think he gets in there, uses crazy abilities, he's flinging people around, and then he gets out.
Yeah, but I don't know, that Batman formula is a formula that works really well for games. And Spider-Man does have some similarities to Batman. You know, he crawls up the sides of walls and does stealthy kinds of things. It's quite satisfying creeping around and stringing up all the guards one by one.
Sneak through the shadows, Spidey. Get out of here alive. Enjoy some time alone.
But that stealth camera, Bajo, I just never quite got used to it. And since it goes into first person and down becomes up and up becomes down, it just, it's so disorienting.
Yeah, I also didn't enjoy those indoor missions at all. That open world is just so good and so much fun to fight in and be in. All the indoor stuff felt like I was just being put in a box. They reused levels too. The worst was when you had to get a sample off Furman, and after chasing him through the sewer for 20 minutes and beating him, he runs away and then runs right back into another sewer, and you basically do it all again.
Yeah, look, overall, I think for a movie game, it does quite well for itself. It has some issues, but, you know, I had a really good time, so I'm giving it 7 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, for all the things I didn't like, I was just so happy to have an open world Spider-Man game again, and just, it's just so fun swinging around, so I'm gonna give it 8. Next up, Tiny Power.
Look, I've got no problem with making money, but not if it makes the game crap.
Which it will.
It won't. Dick's just making some small tweaks.
What the hell? You using mocap?
Just here and there.
What am I supposed to do?
Oh, we still need you for tweaks.
Tweak this?
But Centipedius, I love you.
I love you too.
Beautiful. Yeah, thanks, Megan, but I've got a celebrity who'll be doing all the voices now. Koshi!
Tell him to piss off.
You can't.
He goes, or I go. Actually, we're getting the coding done in the Philippines now, so that'll work out well.
Does Troy know about this?
I've made it.
Hey, how do you turn on the hot tub?
Good game.
As we said in the news earlier in the show, Sega's Australian development arm has closed. It's the latest studio in a long line of once profitable businesses that have now shut their doors.
In the last year, the government, after many years of lobbying by the industry, has put in place an incentive to encourage local development. It's called the Research and Development Tax Incentive. Goose takes a closer look.
Before we can answer whether or not this will be a lifeline for Aussie developers, we need to find out what the Research and Development Tax Incentive involves.
So the Research and Development Scheme allows people who are doing research and development to get a tax offset.
From a small company perspective, being able to get assistance with anything that you're developing is incredibly important.
What we need to see a great deal more of is investment into the Australian industry, something we have sadly lacked for the longest period of time.
The incentive gives any company that's earning under $20 million per year a refundable 45% tax offset on all of its research and development costs. This R&D needs to be catalogued and documented just like a science experiment. You'll need to create a hypothesis, test and perform your experiment, then observe the outcomes before finally evaluating the results. This will potentially lead not only to developing new intellectual property, but also keeping that IP in this country, and hopefully resulting in better gaming experiences.
Look, I think the government does have a responsibility to see where the growth opportunities are across industry, and one of the ways we can support that is through broad-based incentives like the R&D tax incentive. The changes we've made are geared towards businesses of the future, and specifically for the game sector, I think a number of elements of our new R&D tax incentive will be incredibly helpful.
The federal government's gone out of its way to understand game production and game development and the entire culture of games. They've gone so far as to visit a large number of game development studios. They've spoken to a lot of game developers. They've certainly engaged a great deal with the GDAA in understanding what it is we can deliver culturally and economically to Australia. So I'd suggest, yes, they're at a point now where they have a very solid understanding of the game development process.
Out of bounds, on the full.
I think we're starting to see a really good sea change in the way that governments are starting to see the games industry. I think for a long time they were really able to dismiss it as a bunch of kids in a garage mucking around doing their own thing. I think they've suddenly realised it's $1 billion industry, which is actually bigger than the film industry globally, and that suddenly it's become a really important economic driver for the state and for the country. And I'd like to see that come up more in policy.
Will this scheme lead to a resurgence in the Australian game industry, or is it all just a bit too convoluted?
It is an onerous process, and that is the way with government grants. You know, this is taxpayers' money. When we first got involved in the process, we learned of the fact that it was going to be a self-assessed system. So there is a strong need for very heavy documentation. But again, this really talks to the maturation of those smaller indies. They shouldn't shy away from it. They should actually use it as an opportunity to grow the knowledge of their company and of the technology that they're creating.
The idea of the hypothesis and the examples and the proof that's required seems to be a big ask. I think that what's important for people is to know that the single most important thing to do is to log the hours and the costs that they have in doing the research and development work. And I think sometimes the hypothesis and seeing whether you've met that can come a bit later, but you do have to understand what you're getting into and not just go 45% tax incentive, I'm there, because it won't come unless you do the work for it.
I don't think any government program is going to be a magic bullet for any industry, and we really need a number of factors in place, including great participants in the industry. So whether or not this leads to good games, I think it should lead to us hanging on to our intellectual property in Australia, which should lead to more profits being kept in Australia, which should ultimately lead to greater reinvestment and good games. And whether or not it does that will really be up to the developers.
Looking forward, this could be the answer we need, but is the government's involvement actually welcomed by the industry?
So we're already generating a lot of content for a global audience every year. I mean, even without any sort of incentive systems, the games industry in Australia has survived against, what a lot of people consider all odds, and done really, really well. We've got some of the best-selling games in the world out there right now, done in very small studios locally. We're not looking for the government to intervene in the industry. What we're looking to do is create some sort of mechanism that encourages investment into game development so we can grow the industry. We're already sustainable. What we want to do now is grow, and that is why we seek government intervention.
So I think there needs to be, if you want a real embracing of the broadness of the gaming community and the gaming developing community, whether we're building flash games in Facebook or cute little games on mobile, all really big immersive things, I think engagement with us as an industry from the government, I think reducing the red tape for us to be able to apply for grants, and I think trying to work out that we actually aren't in the arts sector, we should be in the economic sector, because we're certainly growing jobs at the moment.
Well, my view is we do need a local games development industry, and there's a strong demand both in Australia and overseas for interactive gaming. So, of course, Australia being an innovative and exciting place, we should be part of that industry.
Thanks, Goose.
The Spec Ops series has had a long history, dating all the way back to the 90s with games on PC, PS1 and Dreamcast. But to be honest, Hex, none of them were that memorable.
Well, that's all about to change. Spec Ops is now in the hands of German developer Jaeger, and it's time for us to walk the line. Captain Martin Walker, head of an elite three-man Delta squad that's been dispatched to a sandstorm-ruined Dubai to locate a US Army general who's gone missing in the disaster, along with his entire regiment, the 33rd. Your mission is to rescue survivors, or at least it starts that way.
Setting this in an opulent city like Dubai, only devastated by sand, makes for a really interesting succession of environments, I think.
What do we got?
It's harsh and hot and feels rather desolate as you march forth through corridors of wrecked vehicles and partially destroyed buildings.
Yeah, those wrecked locations really do a lot to evoke that sense of despair, and quickly things start to go very wrong with your rescue mission.
That's putting it lightly.
Suddenly it's guns blazing and you're fighting for your life.
Less talking, more shooting!
At the core of it, this game is a cover-based shooter, and the sandy environments help to create some dramatic moments, such as the way you can shoot out windows to let sand pour through and smother your enemies. But don't go into this game expecting amazing physics or complex sand-based game-related technology, because that is not this game's focus.
No, but having said that, there were some nice sandy ideas. Such as the way grenades create a blinding cloud of grit when they go off. And of course, there are one or two sandstorms where visibility becomes strained and you're identifying enemies from a hazy muzzle flash. I love that kind of stuff, and sandstorms are so in right now.
I think both of our first impressions of this game was that it was a pretty standard squad-based military shooter.
Yeah, I remember playing the demo a few weeks ago and just, oh, it was so boring. It was just so standard and boring, and as far as the shooting mechanics go, that's fairly true. All the standard stuff is there. You engage in gunfights, lob grenades, switch between an assortment of guns, do some long-range sniping, jump on a turret and mow down your foes, as well as hand out some simple tactical orders to your two AI buddies, such as identifying a target you want them to take out, or ordering them to drop a flashbang, that kind of thing. Special delivery! So right from the start, Hex, I felt like I'd played this game 30 times already.
Well, that's right, but while it starts that way, things change dramatically. A few chapters in, and you soon begin to realise that the line has something very different to say. And what it does is really quite powerful.
And it's frustrating because we can't talk about the best parts and most interesting parts of this game because it would absolutely spoil it.
Yeah, but we have to discuss some of the themes in this game, and you'll have to be prepared to see some spoilery things. Not big ones, but small ones. So that's your warning.
You warned.
Now's our chance, Walker. We got an open path straight to gold.
There are certain events that take place in this game, moral choices that you must make, and a character arc that you must follow, which is both shocking and surprising.
What's going on here?
Survival, Captain. Plain and simple.
The developers have said they take inspiration from the book Heart of Darkness, upon which the movie Apocalypse Now was based. And the results are quite unique for a game like this.
What are they saying now? These people want us gone.
We should get out of here and leave these people to grieve.
Yeah, I think that's the least we can do.
The Line explores what happens when you start to question the morality of what you're doing. Can you kill another human being and call yourself a hero?
You start to ask yourself questions like that, don't you? And I also think the game has something very serious to say about how many modern military shooters essentially program players to kill in a game without remorse.
Yeah, your average shooter shows the bad guy doing something bad once and then they think that's enough, but is it really?
There's an astonishing moment in this game where you're faced with the predicament of needing to use a phosphorus mortar to lay waste to an enemy encampment. As you coolly pick off your targets, you see your character's face reflected back in the screen as the horrible screams of agony fill your ears. It's really intense.
Yeah, it's full on, isn't it? I've never had a feeling like that in a game before, where it really challenges you like that. And there's much more to that scene too that we haven't shown you. It's a real turning point for the game, isn't it? Because it makes you realize it's not just your everyday shooter. This is trying to challenge your moral compass and force you to make decisions at every turn. And there's not always an easy answer.
Yeah, but that's kind of what's so great about it, isn't it? Because quite often, I mean, there is no right choice. You kind of have to choose the lesser of two evils, and it's never made obvious to you.
Yeah, and it's that struggle in that moment where you're trying to work out what to do that's so interesting. One scene in particular where you're faced with an angry mob of civilians. The game is basically leaving it up to you on how you get out of there alive. Is it kill or be killed? The best part is there's no gimmicky press one button to go one way, one button to go another. It's how you act in that moment and how you go with your gut to get through it.
Also, I found that sometimes, you do what you think is right at the time, only to later realize that it was still morally questionable. And it's this sort of stuff that you'll really want to discuss with other players after finishing the line, because a lot of it is ambiguous and there are definitely some alternate endings. It's just exceptional writing, isn't it, Barjo?
Yeah, and it's supported by a very strong voice cast too.
You said it, not me.
And Nolan North's voice is so recognizable. It does take a while to get past that.
Fuck! Take cover!
But even so, I think this is some of his best work.
Look at this. Tags.
Yeah, there's some excellent direction in the voice acting, and Battlestar fans may recognize Edward James Olmos in there.
I think Ice Cubes was in there too.
Ice Cubes.
Yep. Ice-T.
I also really liked how your squad starts out really professional.
Target neutralized!
But then slowly throughout the game they become more weary and bloodied and aggressive as they work to achieve their goal.
Kill is fucking confirmed!
There is this moment where you're not sure if you're shooting at enemies or store mannequins, and the stress of the situation really starts to take its toll.
I said I'm working on it!
Yeah, that was genius. And there are a few parts here which remind me of some of the best bits and ideas from Kane and Lynch. And even that store display of the big orc statue was a bit of a statement that war games are turning us into these kind of ugly brutes. And then you go up the stairs into another brutal fight. There's also lots of symbolism around the place, which we won't spoil for you, but Hex, I just wish one thing, that the actual shooting mechanics, the actual shooting in the game was up to the same quality as the storytelling. I got frustrated with that tight linear level design and just pushing forward room after room.
Yeah, as a shooter it's merely solid, isn't it? There are some fiddly frustrations, like you'll melee smack a barrier instead of vaulting over it, or you'll find that enemies expose themselves a bit stupidly. But there is a good difficulty curve, and Barjo, I just became so intent on getting to the end of this affecting story that I was way more focused on why things were happening than the technicalities of the shooting. I mean, this really is a triumph of storytelling, especially for the genre.
Yeah, there is multiplayer too, but you do get the feeling it's just there because it has to be. It's the usual unlocks and rankings. This is a single-player focused game, and that's the interesting part here.
Yeah, Walker's journey is good enough that it completely renders any sort of average gunplay irrelevant, and I don't know, I think we can both agree that this is a pretty eye-opening game.
Yeah, it's weird how it's been marketed though. It's my opinion that this has been marketed as a stock standard third-person shooter, nothing special at all.
Yeah, I don't know, I think it could be quite clever though, because maybe they're trying to appeal to, the kind of gamer that just loves blasting their way through these stock standard military shooters to then, surprise them with what is quite a confronting message.
Yeah, or maybe they're underestimating gamers though. Maybe they think that this is something we might not want, and if we find out that it's got some message, we might not want to play it. But I think that your average gamer will want something like this, something that offers a bit more.
My feeling is that gamers are going to potentially miss out on something quite intelligent and thoughtful here because there's been no indication from the marketing or, from the demo that this game has anything different to say. I'm also really worried that mainstream media might hone in on the more confronting elements of this game and take them completely out of context when, the game is trying to do the complete opposite. It's holding up a mirror to gamers and saying, this is what you're actually doing when you're playing a game like this, and are you okay with that?
This is a game we should all be talking about. I do wish those shooter mechanics were a lot better, but if you do pick this up, push past the first few hours and get to the real meat of the game. I'm giving it 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, I mean, if you're tired of the old back-slapping, flag-waving, gung-ho message of the Call of Duties of this world, then I thoroughly encourage you to give Spec Ops: The Line a go and absorb its powerful message. I'm giving it 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
We recently caught up with one of the game's developers, Sean Friesen, and here's what he had to say.
We really liked this idea of having a sort of mature military story. So it's something, we're really big fans of, military movies, things like Platoon and Full Metal Jacket and Apocalypse Now, obviously, which, the game is pretty heavily inspired by. So we wanted to do something with that in gaming since, military games are obviously huge right now. But they tend to have this kind of, Michael Bay over the top, rah, 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 go America kind of thing. And, first off, that's not really what war is about. But also, I think that, when you look at war literature and war movies, that's never been what that's been about. And so we wanted to kind of do something like that in the medium that, we were really passionate about. We wanted to avoid making a strong political statement because and it's not so much that we're worried about the controversy, it's just that we didn't want the kind of story that we wanted to tell to get lost in that. So, for us it was more of just, this is part of the reason too why the setting is so fantastic and why for us, it was really more about authenticity and not, strict realism. So we intentionally avoided, doing something like having it set in Iraq or something like that. We wanted to really have just a setting that was like remarkable and amazing and, really kind of, and especially because with this sort of personal journey that we wanted to tell, we felt that this sort of fantastic version of Dubai covered in sand, it's just this incredible city architecturally and just having it wiped out like that really fit what we were trying to do, where we take these guys who, are very, they're very upstanding, they're very clean, they're very good at what they do, and then we do a similar thing to them that we do at the city, where we kind of take them down a peg and wipe them out a little bit.
And you can see that full interview on the website. Good game! So did you guess the game for this week? It was a game called Jaeger, a PC and Xbox flight combat adventure from the early noughties. It was developed, funnily enough, by Jaeger Development, the studio behind Spec Ops: The Line.
Next week on the show, excitement, we return to the world of Skyrim with the first official DLC, Dawn Guard.
They think they can stop us, but we will find them.
And speaking of DLC, I think it's about time we checked out Harley Quinn's revenge for Batman Arkham City.
Police officers are missing. Seems pretty obvious that Harley Quinn is involved.
Our goons ambushed my guys and dragged them towards the steel mill. I'll handle it.
Thanks for tweeting, tweeters, and don't forget to check out some games for younger gamers on our ABC3 show Good Games Spawn Point this weekend.
Until then, gamers, barge you out.
Hex out. We should do like an album of like game themes, but a cappella.
We make millions.
What else can we do?
Sonic.
We do.
What's
that?
That's how it goes. It's jazz, baby.